Most plays about this subject are very sad, and most stories about this are heartbreaking. This endeavors to lift your heart up a bit, not just break it. And I think that's really, now that I think of it, that is what attracted me to this. This was a story about dementia that didn't break my heart. It actually made it grow a little bit. And I don't know, I think that's a rare thing. I'm Jake Broder. If you want to learn more about UnRavelled, the new play, go to unravelledplay.com or just watch this video. UnRavelled had an interesting origin. It started when, it was for three reasons. I was listening to Radiolab, and they did a short piece about Ann Adams and Ravel. And it was one of those public radio driveway moments that they talk about during the fundraisers. I was stuck in the car until it was over. I couldn't get out. And by the time the piece was over, I imagined a story where Anne was going forwards in time and Ravel was going backwards in time, and the disease, and they had that in common, and the music and the painting, and sort of an exploration of the nature of creativity and their relationships, both in their separate worlds and with each other. And I just was swimming in it. I said, I got to tell this story. One of the people who was interviewed on that Radiolab show was Dr. Bruce Miller, and he's the world's foremost expert on frontotemporal dementia. So I wrote him a fan letter, and he, to my surprise, responded. And he asked me whether I was the Jake Broder from Silicon Valley. And I said, yeah. And we struck up a conversation about the case. He gave me a lot of material to read. I asked more questions. We went back and forth a bunch of times. And then he said, look, would you like to be the Hellman visiting artist at UCSF? And this was 2019, I think. And so I said, well, yeah. And they gave me this fellowship, and I went up there to study and interviewed everybody up there at the Memory and Aging Center, which is where Ann Adams was treated, but also it's where they do some of the most amazing research, both into the science and medical aspects of dementia, but also the care and the treatment of it on a very human level. And it's an extraordinary place. And it enriched my understanding of both what the disease is, what it isn't, what the human cost is, both to the sufferers, to the caregivers, to the people who love people who live with it. And it introduced me to a whole community of people who really just live with this in a very profound way. The second reason I had to do this story is because I think I got some skin in the game. Close family member might be looking down the barrel of this, and my grandma had it. She had Alzheimer's. And the prospect of somebody who you love so dearly losing what makes them them is a terrifying proposition. And it's something that a lot of people have to face. And there has to be a way of talking about it. There has to be a way of processing it and dealing with it. It's not something you can just, we can't just all sit alone in the dark and just be left to it. And the third reason is that we're reaching a point in human history where our bodies are outliving our brains for the first time. And brain health and dementia it's going to become more prevalent. It's going to become ubiquitous. Everybody's going to be dealing with it on some level because you're going to know somebody or love somebody who has it or be someone who has it, or we're living long enough to bump into the limitations of what our brains can do. And so we're going to have to reckon with these issues about dementia and brain health in a very real way, in a way that we've never had to before because we're living longer. So all of those things added up to me to be, I need to tell this story. I need to work on it. And I'm really grateful I had the opportunity from the UCSF and the GBHI, that's the Global Brain Health Institute, of which Dr. Bruce Miller is the co-head. They gave me the opportunity to do this, both to commission the play and then to take a crack at it in this extraordinarily strange pandemic-flavored way. To give you a sense of what UnRavelled is about, there is a 53-year-old woman. Her name is Dr. Ann Adams, and she is a brilliant biologist, and she's also a pretty crappy painter. And she, with her husband, has been living outside of Vancouver. And their son had a car accident. And when he did, she said, I'm going to stay home and take care of him because the prognosis was that he would never walk again. So she did. And while this was happening, she, wasn't in the lab anymore. And she said, I'm just going to paint. And she painted a lot of strawberries. She painted one obsessive thing over and over. And her husband was amused and annoyed, and it wasn't a big deal, but she wasn't a painter. So it was like, okay, fine. Then miraculously, the son got better and he went off to college. And so an unexpected happy ending there. So this is where we pick up the beginning of our story. And in UnRavelled, she says, look, she's playing Scrabble with her husband, and she says, look, I have a bit of an announcement. I'm not going to go back to the lab. And the husband's surprised. Well, why? Why not? It's like, because I want to paint. But you're not a painter. And she says, hey, don't you tell me what I can and can't do. And then begins she has this instinct that she wants to paint. And so it causes some friction in her marriage. And then she starts listening to Ravel's Bolero. And Bolero is a repetitive piece of music. It was written by Maurice Ravel in 1928. And it's not really like anything else he ever made. It's most of what Ravel does is very liquid. It's very impressionistic. He's like Debussy. It flows. And Bolero is very regimented, and it's almost perseverative. It's the same melody repeated X amount of times, exactly without variation, just the orchestration changes. There are people who think of it almost like an etude, or a piece that explores the meaning of what an orchestra can do rather than a piece of music in and of itself. And yet it is regarded as Ravel's most popular masterpiece. It's played all over the world all the time and has been since it was made. But Ravel hated it. So she becomes obsessed with this music and starts to paint it. And it's a secret. She keeps it a secret. And she's painting and painting and painting. And she makes up this gorgeous painting of it, which is so much better than anything she ever made before. And her husband is surprised and shocked and delighted. And this is like, wow, this is like a whole new person. And then she starts to show the symptoms. And then she starts to lose words. Her personality starts to shift slightly. It gets so bad at one point that she starts picking up the steak knife from the wrong end. She cuts herself. She forgets that she was just in a meeting and comes back again. And she starts to her speech starts to go, but her painting continues to improve. So they take her to They take her to see Dr. Bruce Miller, who diagnoses her with primary progressive aphasia. And it's a kind of dementia. And through the course of this, she discovers that Ravel had the same, at 53, Ravel was composed Bolero, which itself is the first symptom of his PPA, which he had, and he, like her, died 7 years later. And they both had the same disease, and they were both inspired by the same piece of music stroke art at the same point in their disease, which was a radical departure for them in terms of their creativity. And the theme of this is exploring the idea of what disease is, what creativity is, what is it to love somebody when they fundamentally change, where do the boundaries lie? And also share a story of a disease which has inside it a great and beautiful gift at the very beginning phases that teaches us hugely about the balance of the mind, in that at the beginning of this disease, language disappears just a little bit, which allows music and visualizing to come to the fore a bit more. And perhaps language is too prominent. Perhaps we're too focused on that, and that takes away from some of the other things that are necessarily having to take a back seat while language has the front of the stage all the time. Well, the actors and the creative team are magnificent. I'm so happy and honored to work with them. Nikki Doukas is a director here in Los Angeles who understands pacing and has such a good, austere sense of naturalism, and I really rate her. She's very, very good. The actors themselves, it's funny because the pandemic has yielded almost what I would call the pandemic players. I've written a few plays during this time, and we have the same group of people sort of dealing with them. My sort of pipe dream is to have a repertory company for Max and Willie's Last Laugh, Our American Hamlet, and UnRavelled. It's the same 8 or 9 actors who could do all 3 plays. And I just, in a way, I'm coming out of this pandemic having found the company of people who I'd like to sort of work with for the next 10 years. They're extraordinary. I'm not going to lie, I'm married to one of them, Lucy Davenport. She plays Anne. And she told me a long time ago when I was just starting to write this, she's like, I'm playing this part. And I said, no, okay. And I'm really glad she said that, because this speaks to her. Lucy's superpower is being able to track the finest gradations of behavior and emotion. She's so fine. And this is completely what this is about. This play is all about what is the difference between something that you choose and something that is almost like that you forgot to stop yourself. And it's all about, pathological behavior versus choices. And what does that mean? So it really speaks to her strengths as a performer. And then Conor Duffy, who plays Ravel, is just exquisite. He's an actor who I've worked with before, but he also is my dear writing partner on Max and Willie's Last Laugh. And then Rob Nagle, who is just grand. He's a mainstay of the theater here in LA, and he's worked with me before on Our American Hamlet, and I've always wanted to have him front something. So both Rob and Lucy are playing Robert and Ann Adams. So they're, the center of this, which is a very strong center. And then Leo Marks, who was in Our American Hamlet as well, playing Edwin Booth, he is playing Dr. Miller and is just great. He is one of the few people I know. He studies neuroscience too, and he really is very fluent in the idea of. He's very interested in consciousness. And so this appealed to him on a lot of levels, and I'm very thankful that he was there. Additionally, there was Melissa Greenspan, who is usually a very comic actress, and she brought a real sense of the brittle, angry desperation of one of the characters she played, and then the other one was a care nurse who she really just nailed so perfectly with a mix of sort of dry wit and compassion. And then finally, Mike Lanahan is doing the narration for this, and he has kind of been in everything I've written for the last 10 years. And he's just great to have around. Yeah, it's a really good group of people, and it's sort of the base of the cake of a group of people that I imagine I will be have worked with for a while, and will be working with for a lot longer. What do I want the audience to get out of this play? What I want with any story I tell, I want the audience to feel what I felt when I first heard it. I want them to be fascinated with the reality of it. I want to share with them the wonder and the beauty of this story and what it means. I want them to have empathy and sympathy for the people who struggle with this. And I want them to see that there is a magic that you never thought was there inside something that seems quite desperate and deadly. I'm Jake Broder. If you enjoyed this chat and you want to see UnRavelled, you can go to UnRavelledPlay.com. That's unraveled with 2 L's. And that's UnRavelledPlay.com. And see it. It's available on demand from February 25th, 2021 to March 30th, 2021.